Well, Melissa and I asked former San Francisco Mayor and State Assembly Speaker Willie Brown, himself no stranger to the grand jury process, if a grand jury is good news or bad news for the Trump administration.
It's always bad news if you're the subject matter of the grand jury's deliberations. But it could very well be the sine qua non, the manner by which he ultimately rehabs himself completely, because if that grand jury does nothing, he's got bragging rights for days.
Well, and remember, grand juries can indict, but they also investigate. It looks like right now they're just issuing subpoenas. They're just asking for documents. So it doesn't actually mean that there's any there. Getting a grand jury is not hard. It just has to be in the public interest. And then getting a subpoena is also not hard. It just has to be relevant to the investigation. So it doesn't mean that Mueller has provided any evidence or proven any case in order to get some of these investigatory subpoenas coming in.
Except that in this case of this investigation, he could very well have gotten a subpoena authority from the Congress. There are enough investigations being conducted by the committees which would have removed the stench in the assumptions and also the opportunity for us to discuss grand jury.
Well, but remember, too, this has been going on for several weeks. And in that time, the president started taking shots at Sessions. And this may explain why, sort of out of nowhere, the president is all of a sudden very angry at Sessions if he's got subpoenas coming in the door for his tax returns, et cetera.
So that could have triggered the anger on Sessions, and the recusal is the idea that these subpoenas started showing up and that this grand jury was going to be going behind closed doors. So we in the public, what about leaks? How are we going to know what's going on there, Mayor Brown? You testified in front of grand juries.
Probably not. I have gone before grand juries, and I'm pleased there were no leaks.
well, witnesses actually can leak. A person who's called to testify can talk all about what they said and the documents that they received, but the folks in the room, the jury members, aren't allowed to talk.
Unless, of course, you are encouraged and almost instructed by the person who brings you into the grand jury room not to discuss your testimony, period.
Does Trump get called?
No, of course not. He's not going to get called.
Oh, they said that about Bill Clinton.
And
he did, and that's why he got impeached. He wasn't impeached for lying in a deposition. He was impeached for lying in front of a grand jury. That is an absolute crime. That will get you impeached. If Trump is called, he's going to be in some trouble, because remember, he's not allowed to have a lawyer.
They're not going to call it. Believe me, they will not call Trump. No way they will call Trump on this one.
So, Melissa, are we going to see the end of the Great Russian Show? Is it all going to go behind closed doors?
Oh, you wish. No. Remember, we still got all these committee
hearings. No, I wish
hearings.
it stays out there.
That's true. We want more fun. No, we've got these investigations in the Senate and in the House, but remember, those aren't necessarily criminal investigations.
Right.
What Mueller's looking at is criminal issues, not these more political or civil issues of obstruction or collusion, which aren't necessarily crimes. We have updated fundraising numbers now for candidates for governor. As of June 30th of this year, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom is way ahead. He's raised nearly $16 million. Right behind him is State Treasurer John Chung. He's raised about $7 million. Former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa is in third with about $5 million. And the Republican frontrunner, businessman John Cox, has raised a bit more than $3 million.
Well, as we start to see the money come in from Hollywood and other sources in the governor's race, it makes me wonder just how much of politics, well, is Hollywood? How much is looks? How much is how you say things versus what you say? Well, Melissa and I asked former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, no stranger to showbiz himself, how much of this is about how you look as opposed to what you're actually saying?
I don't think that's a good question, because you said versus substance. Hollywood is equally as substantive on the political issues as almost anybody else. Sometimes the issues that are not addressed by politicians in the private business world gets addressed in the artistic world. So you got clearly, otherwise you wouldn't have had the blacklist years ago when they would say people were communist, etc. All those, Phil, are things that regularly happen. And believe me, if you're the candidate and you can attract that crowd, you got it going for you like no other, because nobody has ever said you were bribed by an actor.
Well, but I think we saw in this last election the limits of that. I mean, you had Hillary Clinton, who had just an incredible star-studded lineup of people coming out supporting her at her rallies, at her events, and it seemed to have no impact on the voters themselves. So while there may be like, hey, that's cool that this is a person who I'm a fan of, does that translate into changing my vote? That's a very different question.
But keep in mind, when Ronald Reagan, who was an actor, stepped up and became part of it, and John Wayne and that whole crowd, that whole right-wing crowd, Heston and all those people, they were effective at helping him deliver It's Morning in America.
But does Gavin Newsom have a Morning in America message? And do we really have to reach back to Ronald Reagan and John Wayne to get an example of what we're trying to say about the current
Well, your
state?
youthfulness forces me to go back to a time period
Yes,
when
please.
there'd be no debate between us.
But look, when you've got a crowded field of Democrats, who's getting the money does become important. It does show sort of where the momentum is gathering, although it's not, of course, as we saw with Meg Whitman and other rich people, money is not the only thing, but it can help.
And if it's money like they currently have, it's no money at all. Meg Whitman, $195 million, and all she got out of it was a job at HP.
You know, it is interesting, the idea of money, no matter where it comes from. It only buys you so much in the big races. I mean, people have to have an impression of you going in. You can't buy ID.
Name recognition, right? Unless your name is, or the recognition is, I'm the person who spent a whole lot of money to lose an election. That can also be a bought reputation in its own way, I suppose.
Yes, well, this is just the first round. I'm sure more money and more interesting people are going to get involved.